Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
As Jesus came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings." Then Jesus asked him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left here upon another. All will be thrown down." When he was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will this be, and what will be the sign that all these things are about to be accomplished?" Then Jesus began to say to them, "Beware that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and they will lead many astray. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is still to come. For nation will rise up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. This is but the beginning of birth pangs. The gospel of the Lord."
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
I speak in the name of God the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit. Please be seated. We are resurrection people. You've probably heard me say that, or if you haven't heard me say it, you've probably heard it said somewhere. That as Christians, we are resurrection people. We like the resurrection. We like Easter Sunday. And the fact that Jesus was raised from the dead is crucial to our faith. It is one of the most prominent features of the Christian faith. And there's a part of us that likes the resurrection, at least me, because of the joy. There's a lot of joy in the resurrection, and it's easy to kind of live in the joy. But the reason that we're resurrection people is because we are also Good Friday people. We are people of a cross, and a death, and trauma, and suffering, and darkness. And we don't like that part as much. That part's a lot harder to deal with than being resurrection people. In our gospel reading today, we have the first of several apocalyptical texts that we'll hear between now and Christmas morning. An apocalyptical, in its strictest definition, means an unveiling. And in our gospel reading today, we hear Mark's version of the destruction of the temple. And this reading is situated in Mark in a unique place in the Gospels. So if we are looking at the Gospel of Mark, the reading that directly precedes this reading that comes directly before it is the reading of the widow's mite, which is the story of the widow who's come to the temple, and Jesus is watching all of the people put in their large sums of money into the treasury, and this woman comes forward with her 2 mites or 2 pennies, and she puts in her 2 cents of offering. And Jesus looks at his disciples and said, "This woman has put in more than everyone else because she has put in all that she has to live on." And then our reading starts with, "And then Jesus exited the temple." So the widow's mite has just happened, and now Jesus is leaving the temple. And this part of our reading is actually a twofold part of the reading. First, we have the destruction of the temple, and then we end with our reading today. And then if we were to continue in Mark's 13th chapter, it gets even more difficult to hear. So this part of our reading, Jesus talks about what will happen to the world as a whole. He talks about wars and rumors of wars and all of these things that will happen. And then the second part of this reading, which we didn't hear, is what will happen individually to his disciples. He says they will arrest you, they will beat you, and they will put you to death, all because of my name. This part of our reading is difficult to hear, and it's one that we don't typically like. And ironically, in this reading, what Jesus says is, "Do not be alarmed." It's almost like he's setting us up for failure. "You just told me really alarming things, Jesus. I should be alarmed." And Jesus, "Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine." And then he ends by saying, this is the beginning of the birth pangs. And any woman who's ever a person who's been around a woman who's been in labor will tell you the very beginning of the birth pangs is not a place you want to hang out for very long. And women will go through labor and they hold on to this hope of what's coming, this beautiful baby that's coming. And they know that this pain is temporary and that it will all be worth it in however many hours or days, because at the end of it, you will have a beautiful baby. And they hold on to it. And then they get a little bit of amnesia if they ever have a second. But there's this period of time where they hold on through the pain because what's coming is better than what is happening. And so when Jesus ends our reading today with this is the beginning of the birth pangs, it's interesting because he's almost saying that what is happening here, all of the destruction of the temple, all of the martyrdom that is to come, all of the horrors of the world, they're temporary. And what is to come after is worth waiting for. It is worth the pain. Any woman who's experienced labor will tell you it was worth the pain. And yet, it's hard because what we're reading today, we don't actually get a beautiful baby at the end of it. We get the kingdom of God, and that is harder to understand because it's not something tangible that we can hold on to. I said at the beginning of the sermon that we are Good Friday and Easter Sunday people. And one of the books that I read in seminary around trauma was called Trauma and Spirit by Shelley Rambo. It's probably one of the best books about trauma that I ever read. And she said that trauma, in its strictest form, has 3 distinct steps. And how you get through those steps has a lot of psychological involvement. You have the stages of grief and all of the things that psychology will tell you about grief and things like that. But she said that trauma has 3 distinct stages, especially for Christian life. The first is the Good Friday moment of trauma. Something awful has happened. There's a distinguishing feature about it. Jesus was put to death on Good Friday. There is one specific thing that has been traumatic and happened. There has been an event. And that is the Good Friday moment of trauma. And then what comes next after it is often not talked about in Christian tradition. And that's the Holy Saturday of trauma. And Holy Saturday is actually a liturgy in the Book of Common Prayer. It's relatively skipped over because by the time we get to Holy Saturday, your clergy are pretty tired from Tenebrae and Maundy Thursday and multiple Good Friday services, and you still have Great Easter Vigil and Easter Sunday. And the service for Holy Saturday is relatively short, probably 5 or 10 minutes if you speak slowly. So oftentimes there isn't a traditional gathering in the church on Holy Saturday, and instead you're told to do it at home. But Holy Saturday as a whole is something that we in Christian traditions typically skip over. But the very first Holy Saturday was one of the most devastating days. It was the day of darkness, of grief, and despair. All of the disciples have gone into hiding. Jesus has died. And all that they know is the death of Jesus. They were pretty sure Jesus couldn't die, and now he's dead, and the resurrection hasn't happened yet, and they don't believe that it will. All they have is their pain and their sorrow and their grief, and the world is dark and confusing. That's the Holy Saturday of trauma. After there's a specific moment, there's a period of time that maybe is days or weeks or months or years of Holy Saturday darkness and grieving. And then, after Holy Saturday, we come to the resurrection. And in Episcopal churches, for Palm Sunday, the day where Jesus' triumphant entered into Jerusalem, you often hear Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem, and then you quickly hear the Good Friday Passion narrative. And those 2 services almost go hand in hand in pretty much every Episcopal church. And the reason is because we don't want you to get from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday without hearing the Passion narrative, without hearing the death of Jesus. Because to get to Easter Sunday, we have to go through the trauma. And like I said, the trauma is much harder to go through because we want to live in that joy. We want Jesus to triumphantly enter Jerusalem, and then we want to fast forward right ahead to Easter Sunday where he's risen from the dead. And yet, we have distinct periods in our time in the Bible and in our own lives where that is not the case, where we have trauma and we have darkness and waiting and nothingness and despair. And our reading from today reminds us that when those things happen, they are the beginnings of the birth pangs, and we shouldn't worry. And that's easy for me to say up here on a Sunday where hopefully none of us, or very few of us, are experiencing trauma. I know that it's easy to say here. And yet what we believe in our tradition is that it is true. And one of the most profound things about our tradition is that we believe that we sit with each other in the Holy Saturday in darkness and grieving. The disciples were not alone. They went into hiding together. And they were with one another in their grief and sadness. And where this reading is situated in Mark's entirety gospel is it's the end of chapter 13, and chapter 14 begins with the heading, A Plot to Kill Jesus. This is the last kind of things that Jesus passes on to his disciples. And Mark is kind of an apocalyptic elliptical writing. He cuts to the chase and he doesn't have a whole lot of fluff in his gospel. In other gospel readings, Jesus says very long and beautiful prayers for his disciple, but here in Mark, Jesus cuts to the chase and tells his disciples, make no illusion, it is going to be difficult, and life isn't going to be all that we hoped it would be. And what is coming is worth waiting for. So here, I hope that what we can do is hold on to that Holy Saturday moment and trust that if any of you are on Holy Saturday today or in the future, you know that me and your church family and your friends and your family are here to help and sit with you in it. And we won't give you platitudes and tell you that everything is perfect and will be fine and anything to ease your suffering. What we will do is hold on to the hope of the resurrection for you. Because as much as we are Good Friday people, we are also Easter Sunday people. Amen. Standing as you are